Our next guest is an old friend of the program. Daniel Marans is a journalist with the Huffington Post covering political and economic issues. First of all, Daniel, good to see you, and thanks for coming back on the show.
It's great to be here, Richard.
So Daniel, your latest, or one of your recent pieces for the Huffington Post begins this way. Soon after two Silicon Valley billionaires launched an online initiative to rejuvenate the Democratic Party Monday night, veteran progressive political operatives began mocking it as an out-of-touch vanity project. Let me get my own bias out of the way first. I am mocking this as an out-of-touch vanity project, but what is the project in question?
So the project in question is called Win the Future, and you can find it at winthefuture.com. The basic idea of it is to disrupt, in Silicon Valley terms, the political system by enabling people who may not be that excited by the political process to air their views. One of the key features of this news site, which they are nicknaming WTF, sort of embracing that irony of that, sort of the profanity that's associated with that. And one of the initiatives is being able to upvote on Twitter various new ideas for politics, and specifically aimed at the Democratic Party. A couple that they've dangled out there are providing free engineering degrees to every American and ousting members of Congress that refuse to impeach Donald Trump, using the catchphrase, "Fire Trump or you're fired." Now, whichever one of these gets the most votes on Twitter can then be put on a billboard courtesy of these Silicon Valley billionaires, a billboard in Washington, D.C., that members of Congress will presumably see. Now, the founders of this effort, including Zynga co-founder Mark Pincus — Zynga is an online gaming company — and LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman, they on the one hand, they frame it as an effort, as an almost nonpartisan effort to get people more engaged in politics, shake up the system. But in interviews and really on the website, there isn't that much evidence, if any at all, that they're targeting the Democratic Party. But Pincus, in an interview revealing the project in the tech publication Recode, really made clear that he's interested in influencing the Democratic Party with this project, and specifically by making the Democratic Party, quote, more pro-business. He wants a Democratic Party that is pro-planet and pro-business, that he believes that the Democratic Party is already going much too far to the left.
Is that because Obama put too many bankers in jail or something? I mean, I'm not sure where that comes from. So let me get this right. So the guy who invented Farmville, where you can trade little pink animals on Facebook, and the guy who co-founded LinkedIn, so a year from now we'll be wishing him a happy work anniversary at Win the Future, put this thing together, and they think that the brilliant idea is that all the people who now say dumb things about politics on Twitter can say dumb things on their new platform, and that's going to reinvent politics. Have I basically gotten it right?
There's one more component to it, which is just that they're playing with the idea. It's still in its sort of germinating phase of getting involved in Democratic primaries. And because there are a couple of California guys from the Bay Area, or based in the Bay Area at least, they, according to Recode and according to what Pincus told Recode, initially really looked hard at primarying House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi and incumbent Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein, both of whom are up for re-election in 2018. That seemed to be rooted in a sense that both of those folks are sort of entrenched in the system. I think a lot of progressives might be sympathetic to that characterization. Ultimately, I think that they decided that might be too much for them to bite off in this initial iteration. Though one of the people that they're approaching about running for office and potentially against Feinstein is the frontman for the 1990s rock and roll group Third Eye Blind, and his name escapes me, but it starts with Stephen.
Well,
And
were the
it's a very
guys?
memorable guy from a very memorable band. They actually
Were
played the Democratic National Convention in 2016.
okay? Were the guys from Everclear not available, or I'm not
I
sure?
think
They're
Smash Mouth is really where what's
good point. Well, you know, we find our political farm team wherever we can get them. So, okay, I mean, I get the sense that we share a certain healthy skepticism about this project. I don't want to put
yeah.
words in your mouth, but you talked to a number of progressives who shared the same skepticism. I've also read that one of the inspirations for the project was that Pincus felt that he and his friends were excluded from the political process because he put some comments in at a Democratic website or something and never heard back. Is that true? Do you know about that?
Yeah, I actually didn't mention that in my piece, but he apparently was disappointed that he submitted some feedback to the DNC website, and they kind of told him that they would get back to him and never did. I'm sure that he can now have that meeting. I mean, he's a donor. They're both donors.
Yeah.
They were both Obama-philes and I should say that they put up the first $500,000 into this website. God knows how this website cost that much money, but whatever.
Right.
And who knows what else is sort of in the works. But the LLC, but they're also enlisting some other Democratic donors like Hollywood executive Jeffrey Katzenberg. I think it's fair to say that these guys probably have the ear of important people in the Democratic Party. But if they feel like or if they feel like, for example, my article, which was subsequently aggregated by Vanity Fair and USA Today and a couple other places, if they feel like they're being laughed at or that the progressive grassroots are not especially receptive to them, then that I can understand. And I guess my answer to them would be talk to the grassroots a little more before you embark on this kind of a project, because this is not the first time that billionaires from any industry have decided that they have all the political answers. And I'm not just talking about Donald Trump, though obviously he actually happens to be a pretty successful political innovator, for better or for worse. I think
Right.
we would agree for worse. But you have projects like No Labels in Washington, D.C., which also is a sort of a centrist attempt to bring both sides together, and with kind of high profile celebrity support, or at least political celebrity support. And that has been sort of widely mocked. I think the problem that these folks are running into is that rank and file voters in both parties are just in a much different place. You have Republican rank and file voters who have embraced a kind of nationalism, or at least have now been given an opportunity to more freely express the nationalism they may have already felt, and oppose immigration and oppose trade that many of their party donors support. They're also skeptical of the influence of campaign finance, and I think they generally support protecting the two major middle-class social insurance programs, Social Security and Medicare, if not Medicaid as well. And Democratic donors Democratic rank and file voters are in a similar place, in the sense of skepticism of their party elites and a desire for more dramatic solutions, in particular to the crushing income and economic inequality that's out there through solutions like single payer, and a desire to be open and unabashed about racial injustice as well. And at that latter part, the Silicon Valley giants might be a little bit more on the same page with that. And so I encourage them to talk to more people about this stuff.
Yeah, and to perhaps not have stupid ideas would help too. But now I think you very rightly, I think, in your piece, Daniel Marans, you point out that you quote a number of several progressive leaders, including our friend Alex Lawson and Jeff Houser, and you say that there's a lot of polling out there, which I think is exactly right, that Americans overwhelmingly want more spending on social programs, that they believe that some corporations and wealthy people don't pay their fair share in taxes. But these guys are talking about something very different. So I get the impression of of people who just kind of live in a bubble And maybe in a world where, because they have so much money, nobody wants to tell them when they don't have a good idea. And in that bubble, maybe more people think the Democratic Party should be pro-business, but in the world where people actually, most people live and breathe and work and play and vote, people really don't care about that. And I think that, I guess the question is, going forward, what's a good way to react? I mean, and, perhaps my own posture of, mockery and scoffing is too negative, but, how do you react when two guys who have enormous resources at their disposal, for better or for worse, we have a very unequal economy and society now. These guys have tremendous resources. They could put it to good use. What do you think is a good way to react to this, other than my perhaps destructive, yet I must say sometimes entertaining form of response? What's a positive way to respond?
Well, look, there is, I don't want to give activist advice, right? But I think that you framed it nicely, which is that there is, on the one hand, mockery, and then on the other hand, earnest advice to these folks. And obviously, they're not alone. I mean, we just heard today from Mark Penn, a fabulously wealthy and failed political consultant who thinks that the Democratic Party should move to the center as well. So it's something that seems to have it's one of those zombie ideas that seems to have an infinite half-life in the sort of donor class. The other tactic from mockery, which can sometimes be effective in shaming people, or at least in pointing out some of the contradictions in people's thinking, is just an earnest response and saying, hey guys, if you want to help, listen, and we have places that you can put your money that are different. One of the things that I've been struck by, and I haven't really written about this, is that when it comes to this issue of economic policy that so divides the Democratic donor class from the base, there has not really been a good herding mechanism for donor money to progressive economic institutions. And I say that because, for example, the support for the ACLU, which is a terrific organization, the American Civil Liberties Union, has been incredible, over the top, overwhelming. And the same thing for Planned Parenthood, which admittedly has tremendous economic implications for millions of women. And both of these groups are fighting to protect Obamacare, which I think is a terrific thing. But there's been no $20 million fundraising campaign for Matt Brunig's Patreon campaign to start a think tank that could really score single payer. There's been no outpouring of San Francisco and New York liberal money toward the 0 hour with RJ Eskow. So I think that, and I think part of that is a failure of the progressive left for failing to really be out there making that case. Mm-hmm. Hey, maybe instead of giving $100 million to the ACLU, we could have $5 million of that. And that would be something that I think would be really interesting. And the other thing, I would just add, it's interesting. I saw some debate breaking out about this on social media. Tom Matzey, who is himself now a clean energy entrepreneur and was a top dog at Move On in the 2000s, and I think it's fair to say is still a pretty public liberal face, sort of tried to tamp down on some of the mockery and the criticism, basically saying, we're glad that they want to be at the table. We're glad that these people have ideas that they want to contribute. The Democratic Party is on the floor. We need to not make people feel like crap when they decide to weigh in. So that's another perspective. And then the final thing I would just add is maybe Mark Pincus and Reid Hoffman could actually take a leaf out of Mark Zuckerberg's book, the Facebook co-founder. As much as I believe that Facebook is guilty of monopolistic behavior and I do not trust Mark Zuckerberg to save us from the various problems that we're currently facing, he at least has the humility right now to be doing a 50-state tour. Now, what that's a prelude to, I don't know. Many people obviously believe it's a prelude to some kind of a political project, including a presidential campaign. But the fact that he has the humility to try to learn from ordinary Americans before launching that project is something that Pincus and Hoffman maybe could really learn from.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I would argue the best way to do that is in real space and not in, by creating another platform for upvoting comments. I have to say, I hear everything you're saying, and I think they're great points, Daniel Marans. I will only say, on top of everything else, it's not a very imaginative idea, and maybe what they should really be doing, instead of soliciting ideas for politics, is go a little meta and solicit ideas for what they can do in politics, which is a kind of another way of saying what you're saying. But as always, great to talk to you, Daniel Marans, political reporter and economics reporter for the Huffington Post. Great coverage, and thanks for coming on the program.
Always great to talk, Richard.
Same here.